Good day, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Happy Friday. Happy impending weekend to all. Give me just a second. None of this is anything you guys need to worry about having to do. Don't worry. Yet. Bless me. So, I have, for every assignment that was turned in on Wednesday, I have those graded. I'm putting them up here now. I recommend you come up and grab them, take a look. Everyone did, whoops. Everyone did well. Congratulations. I am not at all worried going into this test because everyone has been doing routinely very well on all their assignments so far. So what we're going to do today is go over any questions that you guys have from this particular assignment, either how any of the questions worked or how any of the grading worked. And we'll also take a look at all of the various information that you should know and be familiar with and take a look at for the test. As a reminder, said test is now next Wednesday. If you missed last time and weren't aware of that, I apologize. So the test is next Wednesday. We're taking today to study, and you have the weekend to go over things before Wednesday itself. So, if you turned your homework in last time, I recommend you come up and grab your copy. I have a couple new copies here that I will look at very quickly.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask about.
Yes. I will grade these very fast so that you A, have your grade, and B, have your assignments back to study from it. Oh, that would be why I had fewer than I was expecting. I will look over that quickly as well. Sorry about that. Oops.
I didn't do the test.
So, I will very quickly grade these for anyone who needs the assignment to still be looked at. Everyone else, please look over the assignment that you just got back and any previous assignments. Additionally, be looking at the practice problems on the Brightspace page. I will do these very quickly and get right back to you. Assume that I remember what we
solve for me or something?
Oh, I am not planning anything that takes nearly as much time since the test is meant to fit within a class period. So these will not be time trial questions, I promise you that. Shall we? 0. Richard? Caleb, that was recorded, and I sent you an email reply. Very well done. Okay. How does everyone feel about this one? Overall, things are very good. Some minor things to be aware of. Make sure to, I find it personally helpful to write down every single thing that I know about the triangle. Every single total angle, every single side. Even as I'm finding it out, put it onto the drawing after the fact. Because once it's on there, it just helps me visualize it a little bit better. That's one tip that I tend to do myself. Overall, though, no consistent things, no consistent errors across the board. But let's begin today with, if you look over it and see anything that you don't understand why I graded it the way that I did, we can take some time to talk about that. Make sure that everyone's comfortable with this assignment before we move on to looking at the test as a whole.
For the test, are we going to be given the, what sign, cosine, and adjacent on, or do we need to like, know that? Do we need to memorize that?
So Patella?
Like what each one is, like the opposite. And
Oh. During the test, I will be putting certain things up on the board that are just free access for everybody. For example, the quadratic formula. I know there's others, but in this moment, I've forgotten all physics because I have to think of something off the top of my head. At least the quadratic formula and any other things that are needed throughout. Oh, and the any conversions that pop up as well. As for that, that's hard to say because there's no generalized drawing for that, but if this is a right angle, and if this is theta, you always have to pick one angle, and from its perspective, this is op, this is adjacent, and the slanted one is always the hypotenuse. If this is helpful to everybody, I can have this on the board during the actual assessment. That said, does this help with your inquiry?
I think so.
Okay. If this isn't helpful, then I'd rather come up with something else. This is how I like to do it. And then subsequently, if you were looking at it from this angle's perspective, opposite would be the leg it's not touching, and adjacent would be the leg that it is touching.
So we could solve like the same problem differently? Like
Correct.
whichever angle? Okay.
Yeah, so say for example, this triangle, half of my own markers are out of ink, so I have to be very particular. Let's say we had a 90, 60, 30 triangle. And I'll just label these legs A, B, C. From the 60-degree angle's perspective, sine of 60 degrees would give us A over C. Cosine of 60 would give us B over C. And tangent of 60 would give us A over B. From the other angle's perspective, sine of 30 would tell us, opposite here would be B over C. Cosine of 30 would be A over C. And tangent of 30 would be B over A. And if you were solving for the legs, all of these would give you the correct answers. It's just a matter of if you pick a starting angle, you need to be consistent about it. Because if you start from here and do sine of 60 equals A over C, and then you go over here and do sine of 30, that's going to tell you something else. That said, though, it is worth noting that the sine of one angle is the cosine of the other angle, which is why you can do it one way or the other and ultimately get the same pieces of information. You just need to make it clear to yourself and on your notes which one you're starting from and what perspective you're keeping throughout the rest of your work. Similarly, cosine of 60 is B over C, so is the sine of 30. And you can check this in your calculator as well. The only one that doesn't work the same way is tangent. Technically, this would be the cotangent of the first one. Let me actually... I know not everyone here owns a graphing calculator, and that is okay, it is not required. But if you do have one, and you want to see how they're connected like this, you can graph sine of x, cosine of x, and tangent of x. And my old dinosaur is really not built for this anymore. Come on, Tiny, speed it up. Sorry for this brief pause. I don't remember the shape of tangent forms. were to graph them, sine and cosine are very closely related. Sorry. Not exact, but they're offset from each other only slightly, like they will equal the same thing if you take it from the other perspective. Tangent, meanwhile, is off doing its own thing because it doesn't play well with friends. So, just a fun fact, these will flip for the other angle, these ones will fight each other. I don't know what this is anymore. Because I've gotten so far away from the original question at this point, I apologize. Anything else? And also, does that help with the original work? Okay. So, oh, yes.
Is the test gonna be like evenly, like just an even amount of like everything we've gone over?
Yes, and I'm gonna actually turn the projector on so that I can show you all the materials for test study. Oh, that was off. That's gonna take a second to warm up. Yes, everything will be pretty equally represented. The one kind of weird exception is homework 2, since homework 2 was entirely calculator tips and procedures. So there won't necessarily be a calculator question. On that particular assignment, we had things like enter this into your calculator and then stop and then edit it and then press enter. I'm not going to do that. That was entirely just for that assignment to make sure you could use the machine. In actual physics, I don't really care exactly what way you use your calculator to do it. If you enter it all in one step, if you do it in chunks, as long as you know how to use it, that's the important part. So there's no real question about like enter this and then use the insert function. Instead, you'll just be expected to know how to use the machine for all the other parts. So since we're edging into just test question territory, I say just go ahead and take a look at all those, at all the test information that I have for you, unless anyone has any last minute things from just assignment 4. And it's okay if you don't have them yet. If you come up with questions, please ask them. It's on. So, thank you, Brightspace, for logging me out again. At least you're more polite than what I was saying. Okay, so this is our Brightspace page. You should know that you're in the right place when you click on course info and you have this class's syllabus and other information pieces. The next couple of tabs are tabs for all the assignments that we've done so far. So the first homework and some notes for that first set are in here. The second homework, third homework, etc. There is a tab for the test itself. If you click on the test tab, it will bring you to this list of concepts. This is all the stuff that we have looked at so far in the semester. So from top to bottom, we began with review of the order of operations. PEMDAS is the generalized form, which we usually mean to refer to this question has just numbers and use the order of operation to find the one number that it's equal to. Within this physics department, we like to use, my professors who are now my co-workers, like to use SADMEP to refer to a situation where you've got a situation where you're solving for x that's buried inside of an equation, and you work backwards to get that x by itself. So we begin by adding, subtracting this term over, then we would multiply, divide this term over, then we would look at the parentheses, factor everything in that out, and then look at the exponent, things like that. So it's really all just blanket statement order of operations. be familiar with, if you look at any sort of math equation, be familiar with the steps one must do to logically and correctly perform the algebra and manipulate your elements. Then fraction addition, and subtraction. There were sample questions for that in chapter 1, the first assignment, and also on the test problems. So be familiar with those rules. Algebra, kind of referring back to how to use the order of operations properly. Be able to correctly manipulate an equation when moving elements from one side to the other to solve for x. I've noticed some repeated errors across that, just in terms of refreshing one's algebra ability. That is fine. General thing to keep in mind: just make sure that whatever you do to one side, you also have to do to the entire other side. Say in this particular instance, we've got 4 times stuff in parentheses, and then minus something that's not in the parentheses equals 4. A first thought might be to try to divide everything by 4. So you divide by 4, you divide by 4, and where's the problem here?
The left side's going to be a fraction.
Correct. When we divide the left side by 4, it has to be everything on the left side by 4. So that would create this you can't legally do. And if this simplifies things for you, go ahead. Just be aware that you do have to count it. So on the next line, it wouldn't be -8, it would be -2. Because you have to divide it by 4. That's probably the algebra mistake that I've seen most often. So again, just be aware, try to catch yourself. Logarithms. Nate, when I say logarithms, the things that I am asking you to be familiar with are the idea that if you see log base 10 of x equals something, you can get that x out of the log by raising everything to the 10th power. So be familiar with how to break down a normal base 10 log, and similarly, if it's a natural log, those break down, instead of raising things to the 10th power, you raise it to the eth power. Eth being its own weird number like pi.
If x is attached to e in the equation, do we multiply everything by?
Good question. So technically this is not multiplication. This is an operation, like square or square root. So I'd be more correct to, like what your calculator would do is, if you hit the natural log button, it would be ln, open parentheses, the thing that ln is acting on, and then close parentheses. So I'll sort of show the reverse example over here. Let's say that instead we had 10 raised to the x power is equal to a. How do we get that down? Well, we know from over here that the inverse of log base 10 is to raise things to the 10th power. So I'd say the reverse on this side would be, I'll show the middle step here. Log of 10 raised to the x equals log of a. It's an operator, and as long as you do it to both sides evenly, you can just perform it on either side. And log base 10 of 10 breaks down like squaring a square root, which leaves us with x equals log of a. So you can do these in either direction, whether or not the x is inside the log or whether or not the x is raised as an exponent. Yes?
So problem if we were given an A would be a number, and then when we did it, would we just leave it as log of that whatever number, or do you want us to actually plug that into the calculator?
Your calculator should have a log function, so you should be able to give me a number for
Okay, I just
this.
didn't remember from the homework if you said we leave it like that, or if you wanted us to like put it in the calculator, put log and then put that number and get your test number.
If the question was simply what does x equal, I'd probably be okay if you left it like this. Like how I'm usually okay if you leave pi in the answer and don't factor it through, unless the question says find me the numerical answer.
But like we could solve for it and not get points taken off.
As long as you got to this step, and this is what I'm caring about, and then you went to the next line and said x equals 2, even if this doesn't give me 2, I would still circle this and put a check mark by it. Because you got to the correct point, and then maybe your calculator did oops. So for this type of question, I care more about getting to this spot. There will be some questions where the point is, tell me the numerical answer, but this is an algebra question, I care more about getting the algebra right. The natural log version, just so that is on board for you guys. If e is raised to any power, you can get that power down by taking the natural log of everything. Natural log and e just cancel out. That will leave us with x equals natural log of a. So be familiar with those rules. They are in the notes that I provided for the first week, the order of operation notes. That was all from the first assignment. First assignment was all remembering all of these algebra steps. The second assignment was calculator functions. Again, there won't be a calculator question. Just be familiar with the answer function, how to manipulate everything in your calculator so that you can do the everything else. Then these next three are from the third assignment: polynomials, foiling and unfoiling, and quadratics. Be able to foil two polynomials into each other, be able to solve a polynomial for what x is equal to. We get usually 2 or 3 answers. And there will be some unfoiling questions. So the rules, be able to remember the rules for unfoiling as presented. And there are, if you have a method other than what I said, someone mentioned illegal moves, which is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around, but it's very cool when it works. You have your own method for unfoiling, great. Be able to unfoil to some capacity. And then for the quadratics, I will provide you the quadratic formula. I will give you x equals negative b plus minus yada yada. It's up to you to be able to use it. And then the last section is assignment 4. Remember your trig functions, diagram theorem, and how to convert between degrees and radians, and how to make sure your calculator is in degrees mode. Granted, even though I'm a physicist, I don't really like radians because all my math classes as a kid were in degrees, and so I just have that internal bias. So I will be asking you how to convert between degrees and radians, because physics classes are going to have radians in them. But in terms of triangles, I'm going to probably tend to stick to degrees as much as possible. So make sure your calculator is in degrees mode and that it stays there. If somehow a goblin comes along and changes it, make sure you can change it back. Yes?
So with that, between the two modes, in my head, I thought whenever we're trying to find the side of a triangle, it was in radians, and then when we're finding a degree of a triangle, it's in degrees. Is that wrong?
That is incorrect.
Okay, my calculator, it would, I don't know, I had to like switch it, and it would give me the wrong answer depending on what it was set on, and then if it got switched, it would give me the right answer. And I don't know, maybe that's just because like I don't like triangles, and so I'm not exactly sure what happens, but,
You're allowed your preference. I'm sorry to say there's gonna be triangles all over the place.
The only time we have to really switch that setting is when we're trying to convert from radians to degrees or degrees to radians.
You don't even really need it for the conversion. The calculator's mode only affects these operators. So if your calculator is in degrees mode, sine, cosine, tangent will be expecting degrees. Or inverse sine of A over C will give you degrees. If it's in radians mode, you would need to plug in the radians equivalent of 60 to get A over C. Or if you did inverse sine of A over C, that would give you the answer in radians. The mode only affects these operators. Your calculator does not care what you're converting if you're doing a conversion. It doesn't care. Most of the units have canceled, and that's the only unit left is what's on your paper. If you're just doing a conversion, the mode is irrelevant. Mode only refers to these things, as far as the machine brain is concerned. So, for me, personally, the way that I'm writing questions, get it into degrees mode and keep it there. Because while you will do some degrees radians conversions, the mode has nothing to do with those because they aren't using these. That didn't make it more confusing, did it?
No, I just,
Okay. Yeah, I don't like radians. I fully admit I don't think they're really that good. We have degrees, and degrees is what's driven into our heads since we're children. But radians show up because when you do a lot of math for rotating objects, radians is what shows up because it's in terms of 2 pi, and that's just the thing you naturally get when you start dividing radiuses and things into circles. So radians pop up in physics, I just don't like them. They're there. I'm trying to minimize their presence. Yes?
Do I have to go on number 4 with the questions?
Okay, that's an excellent segue. So now you can take a quick look at our practice questions. So on the Brightspace page in the test tab, we have several practice problems. These are completely optional. You don't have to look or do any of these at all. I do think they're good practice though, because the test will be very, very, very similar. So if you can do these, you're golden. You said number 4. I forget which one that is. Solve for x. Okay. So this is algebra, ordered operations, and fractions. Big combo problem, because in your upper level physics classes, there's going to be a lot of disciplines crammed into a single question, especially on the test when you have questions. So let's take a look at this and go through it one step at a time. I will be uploading an answer key to these. I haven't gotten around to actually getting the file in yet. I do apologize for that. It will be up soon, I promise you, so that as you're working, you can check your answers and make sure you're on the right track. What I will likely be doing is simply printing this out, doing my own work on it, and photocopying that, which means that if you can't read my handwriting, let me know. I'm sorry. Get a marker with ink in it. Okay, number 4. Go all the way over here because this might take some lines. This might take a few lines. We have 6 plus 3 over x. All of that divided by x over 4 plus 1 over 8. Whole thing equal to 1. So, we eventually want x equals blank. This is a little tricky because there's two x's and they're both buried in different parts of the equation. This is not a trick question. I just want to know, first instinct, what are your first thoughts about what we should do?
Multiply the x over 4 by 2, so it can be equal to x, or 2x over 8.
Okay, that's a thought.
Just get the x out of the denominator.
Okay, those are both good thoughts. Those are both probably what I would be thinking too. I'm going to favor getting this out of the denominator. Because right now, locked into this fraction, we can't really manipulate either x because they're buried super far into their own little worlds. So I think good valid first instinct is get that bottom x out of the denominator. And I see one thing we can do that will send it over with little to no issue. And I admit, I probably should have put parentheses in here.
Why not just multiply the entire denominator?
We can multiply both sides by the entire denominator. Very good. I put those parentheses there just to enforce in one's head, this can be treated as one whole thing that we can manipulate accordingly. So, I might be skipping a little bit of work, so do please stop me if I'm going too fast. Anyone confused by that, please?
Is it 4 over x? Is it
Thank you. I make mistakes sometimes because I am a human.